assuming most of the people who are here sort of know the basic story of Big Star and Chris Bell, who obviously passed away in 1978. But in terms of that period, you know, basically John kind of ran a recording school for local musicians, and out of that group of people came Jody and Andy and Chris Bell, and the sort of prehistory of Big Star has different kind of recording things. But Jody and Andy, talk a little bit about kind of where you guys were at. You had been working, and Alex being a sort of established star at that point, or having had been one, the prospect of him joining the band, or, you know, getting together with you guys, what was that like for you, Andy, in terms of, you know, this?
Well, you know, we've been, the three of us, Chris and Jody and I, have been struggling for some time playing, you know, these awful little fraternity parties at local colleges and stuff like that, and, you know, department store openings and those sorts of gigs. And, you know, we had been got our foot in the door at Ardent a little bit. And, you know, by taking John's famous recording course, if you're lucky, you got a key to the studio, which was a major step forward. But you know, just the notion of, well, here's Alex, he's back in town, and, you know, adding him to the band was like, oh, wow, that would be the thing that would push us over the top, hopefully, and actually put us in a position where we actually could get in, record a LP, and do something with it, and people would listen to it. And so obviously that was a big plus if we could make it happen.
So much has been written and talked about the relationship between Chris and Alex, and Chris was an incredibly talented person in his own right and had labored in a way for many years on this project, which sort of led to and became the first Big Star record. Talk a little bit about, you know, what you saw as the dynamic between Chris and Alex. I mean, I think Chris had a very romanticized vision of, you know, Chilton Bell, or Bell Chilton, you know, in terms of the songwriting credits, mirroring Lennon-McCartney. John or Jody, talk about a little bit about, you know, it is in Alex's life a very short period, actually, relatively speaking, in a period of maybe 18 months, 2 years tops, where the four of you and Alex and Chris had that, you know, collaboration. But, you know, this room is filled with people who are here, you know, in large part because of that. Talk a little bit about, you know, the experience of Chris and Alex, you know, once you guys got it together.
My recollection isn't. I mean, it's more general and stuff, but something more specific was there was a building next door to the studio, and we got to practice, and I remember Alex and Chris saying, you know, here's a new song, and it was, I don't know if they actually had the title at that point, but it was Ballad of El Goodo, and how it came together. And but I was just one thing I was always astonished at how that the songs they came up with, and even, you know, post #1 record and stuff with Alex, but how they connected with me, because, you know, we'd primarily been a cover band, and James Gang and Led Zeppelin and Beatles and stuff, and here songs were being written by Alex and Chris and Andy as well, and there was this great emotional connection with me there too. So that was a gas, but I just remember that one moment. But I think Andy actually came up with the title of Ballad of El Goodo.
What's really surprising is how well, you know, you got a couple of really alpha guys here, you know, and guys whose talents are run along very similar lines, and yet, at least the period you're talking about there, they work together very, very seamlessly. You know, I don't recall ever sensing a whole lot of conflict and or anything like that. It was like everybody was pushing forward for this common objective, you know, which was to get this album built and engineered and performed and released. And you know, I think that's really interesting. A lot of people, when you talk to them, you do interviews and stuff, people are looking for there to have been a lot of conflict and a lot of difficulties and stuff like that, and I never got that at all.
And so much of the credit for all three of the Big Star records, you know, in terms of the way they sound and what the guys learned in terms of the studio has to go to John. And John, talk a little bit about you know, the sound of those records, I think why they've endured and why, you know, people are still listening to them is because they are timeless, because they still sound so fresh, you know, ahead of its time and of its time always. Talk a little bit about, was it just being able to be in the studio so much? Because, I mean, you worked on that record, #1 record, for quite a while, and in, you know, really, in Chris's case, was leading, and these guys was leading up to it for a number of years.
Yeah, well, Chris had a couple of tracks from the Rock City project that he did with Tom Eubanks that actually went on #1 record. And yeah, the recording school was great. I mean, I badgered these guys pretty good. They didn't just learn what button to push. It was like, this is how this kind of microphone works, and this is how the tape recorder actually works, and
The physics behind it.
Yeah.
I remember the first lesson being you drew, you got some paper and you drew sound waves. It started with sound waves.
John is thorough.
That's what I'll start with. But yeah, we started #1 record at the studio we had from '66 till November '71 on National Street, and really moved into our new purpose-built building at 2000 Madison, where we still are. We moved in November '71, so we're kind of, you know, pretty much through the tracking phase of the record. And, you know, everybody always asks me about, well, how do you get a record to sound good? And I tell them, well, first of all, get some really good players, okay?